Okay, so we're now on to our second round of simplification, which is looking at multiplying and dividing terms, having added and subtracted terms in the previous lesson. The big difference here is that any terms can be multiplied or divided. We don't need to worry anymore about like terms. And the way we tend to write things algebraically is that if we're multiplying two terms together, we put them in alphabetical order and we don't use a multiplication sign. So, for example, you would write AB not B times A. So you'd put the A before B and you wouldn't use a multiplication symbol. For division, we tend to use a fraction rather than a division sign, and the reason why is because it's clearer as to exactly what you're dividing by what if you use the fraction symbol. So here you would write it as A over B, not A divided by B. We use our power rules when we're doing this, so when we multiply things we're going to need to add the powers if the bases are the same. If we divide, we're going to need to subtract powers. So if you had, for example, a squared times a cubed, you would write it as adding the powers gives you a to the power of 5. And we need to take real care with negatives here. So just to remember that if we're multiplying or dividing a positive by a negative, we get with negative answer. Same if we're doing a negative times or divide a positive. So if the signs are different, our answer ends up being negative. If they're both negatives, we end up with a positive answer. So we're going to have a look at a couple of worked examples, and I've chosen these examples as the most complicated that you're likely to get on a foundation GCSE paper. If you can do this, then you shouldn't worry too much about anything more complicated and you'll have no problem doing the questions in this chapter. Okay, so I'm going to do this in a shorthand way and then I'm going to show you why it is, just to prove that it's the result that we say it is. So I'm going to start by looking at my numbers. I've got negative 3 times by 5. Negative 3 times by 5, reminding myself of my rules of negatives. I've got negative times by a positive, which is this rule here. Negative times by a positive gives me a negative answer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write in that that is a negative answer. I've got 3 times 5, which gives me my 15. I've then got my a squared times by a. Now remembering from previous unit, if there's no power at all, that's the same as a power of 1. So I've got a squared, a to the power of 1. I add the powers. 2 plus 1 gives me a to the power of 3. And then looking at my b's, I've got b to the power of 1, b to the power of 3, which gives me 1 plus 3 gives me b to the power of 4. And this is our standard way of writing it. Our number comes first, followed by letters in alphabetical order with powers. Now, just to prove to you that that's right, I'm going to write this out in full. So here, what this means is negative 3 times by a, that's my a squared, times by b, times by 5, times by a, times by b, times by b, times by b. That's just the full writing out of what I've got in the line above. Now, if I put these in order, I'm going to put my numbers first. I've got negative 3 times by my 5. There's my 5 over there, so I'm going to just cross that off to show that I've used them. Then I've got times a times a times a. 1, 2, and 3. And then I've got times b times b times b times b. So times b 4 times. Negative 3 times by 5 gave me negative 15. A times a is a cubed. B times b times b times b is b to the 4. So that's the reason why we ended up with this answer here, but I would expect you to be able to just write this out straight away by using the thinking process that I described. Looking at the division question, I've got 10a cubed divided by 15a. ignore that power there, sorry, that's my mistake. 10a cubed divided by 15a. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write that as a fraction. As we set up here, divisions we write as a fraction. So I've got 10a cubed over 15a. Now, I'm going to use simplifying my fractions. So, looking at what goes into both 10 and 15, well, both of them are in the 5 times table. So I'm going to divide both of them by 5. 5 goes into 10 twice. 5 goes into 15 3 times. So I've got 2/3. Here, I've got a cubed divided by a to the power of 1. 3 take away 1 is 2. So it's going to give me an answer of 2 over 3 a squared. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not that a squared is written here or whether it's written on top of the fraction. It means exactly the same thing, or 2a squared divided by 3. Either of those is an appropriate way of writing my answer. Okay, can you pause the video there and make sure you've got the worked example written down before trying the questions below. Okay, and here are your 10 questions to try. Please write them down, pause the video, and then unpause the video when you're ready to mark your answers. Okay, so here are the solutions to the exercise. Hopefully you all had no problems in questions up to number 4. The multiplications are easier than the divisions. Just be careful, once you get to number 5 here, you write it as a division, 20a divided by 10. The 20 and 10 can both be divided by 10, which will give you 2 over 1a. Just remember, if you've got a fraction over 1, you can just write it as a whole number. Anything as a fraction out of 1 is a whole number. So just be careful, because that's the same issue as we're likely to see on some of the later questions. Here I've got a positive divided by a negative, so it gives me a negative. Negative 6b over 1. Remember, I don't write that over 1. Here, my x's both cancel. I divide both by x. Using our power rules, I would have 1 take away 1, which is nothing. So it'd be 4x to the power of nothing, which is just no x's at all. And so it gives me an answer of 4. Here I've got negative divided by a positive, so it gives me a negative answer. 10 divided by 2 gives me my 5. Z squared divided by z gives me z. Gets more difficult as we get on to 9 and 10. I should have got, when I simplify here, I get a negative answer because I've got a positive divided by a negative. 6 goes into both 6 and 36, so it goes in 1 on the top and 6 on the bottom, and p squared divided by p gives me p. For the last one, I should have got minus 3m on 4. Give yourself a mark, please, out of 10. If you're having any difficulty with this, and I think some of you may want to do a little bit more practice on the dividing terms, please go on to Hegarty clips 158 and 159. 159 is the dividing terms one. So if you had no difficulty with multiplication, just go on to 159 to have a look at dividing terms. Well done.